Chapter 51 Ancient Night Race. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The scene went back to the time when he jumped into that sea, how he bathed there to repair his cultivation foundation, until he was pulled up by the ice goddess. Next was the scene where the elf queen helped him fuse with the Holy Spirit flame. Why are you daydreaming? Seal was distracted by the elf queen's voice suddenly calling out to him, causing the scene to disappear from his sight as he had no other choice but to disable the power of his eyes. He then looked up at the elf queen who was staring at him with a furrowed brow. Just fantasizing, Seal replied with a soft laugh, lying to her. Surprisingly enough, the elf queen asked again, fantasizing about what? Since she asked, Seal would of course use the opportunity to say nonsense. Yeah, fantasizing about the day when I become the strongest in the 7 realms and then come to your kingdom to propose to you, and spend the night with you. You. The elf queen's breathing instantly quickened at his words. She felt like throwing him back into the sea. Seal was not interested in seeing her expression. He then looked down at his own hand. Shwa. Transparent flames gathered on top of his palm, forming an extremely dense fireball, seemingly able to perforate steel walls with ease. Great, said Seal, happy to finally have a power that could be called unique. The reason it was called unique was of course because there were few or no users. Firstly, although the Holy Spirit flame belongs to the lower ranks, its number in the entire 7 realms could not be much either, and whether anyone possesses it is something unknown. Actually, the top 5 ranks of the sacred flame even had only one in the entire 7 realms. The one at the first rank was only a legend, its existence completely unknown. At this moment, Seal could feel something different within his body in his control over the flames. It gave him a clear sensation that he was no longer an ordinary cultivator, but a cultivator with the Holy Spirit flame. His ability to cultivate would naturally be different. He could become so much more talented that his cultivation could increase rapidly, competing with top geniuses. Now we can go back, Seal said to the elf queen. He wanted to continue cultivating, swallowing the pill the elf queen had given him. It was not suitable to do so here because refining a pill would take a longer time. Only, right after he said that, the elf queen's eyes suddenly narrowed sharply, staring into the depths of the pole of hell. Old demon, how dare you hide in my territory? Suddenly, the ice goddess' voice resounded coldly, and it spread over a wide region. Even the people in the entire ice continent could hear it. Only a moment after that, the space became filled with terrifying pressure, as if the destruction of the world was about to come. Everyone who had heard the voice of the ice goddess became short of breath due to the difficulty in taking in air. Seal was lucky to be beside the elf queen, gaining protection from her, or else he would have died instantly as the distance between him and the ice goddess was not far. Whoosh! Suddenly a wisp of black energy flew into the sky from the depths of the pole of hell. It then spread out, and a gigantic creature appeared there, so large that its head seemed to reach the sky. People could still see it clearly even from the Fire Mountain continent. The creature was actually a skull whose bones seemed to be made of diamonds and whose figure was enveloped by a black cloak that wasn't actually a cloak, but the energy that formed the cloak. It had a pair of red eyes that looked like the sun, emitting an ominous light everywhere. When Seal looked at it with his eyes of heaven, he finally realized that not only was the cloak made of energy, but the skull as well. It was all energy. To reach such a size, the power required was truly beyond imagination. As Seal made observations, he finally discovered the source of that great power. It was between the 2 eyes of the skull. There was an area covered by many walls of energy, and within it stood an old man with pale white skin with hair so black that it seemed like it was darkness, not hair. Who is he? Seal asked spontaneously. The elf queen was surprised to see that he didn't seem to be intimidated by the man's presence. This was a different case to when the ice goddess had looked at him coldly because the man had unleashed his full power. Anyone below the god level should have been intimidated by that power, as their brain would wonder if they could survive. A god of the ancient night race, the elf queen replied with a very serious expression. Ancient night race. Seal was hearing about it for the first time, but he couldn't help but think in a profound way as he looked at the elf queen's expression. Plus, why did the ice goddess seem so hostile towards him? Was there a big conflict between them? The old man stared at the ice hill where the ice goddess was. Ice goddess, you won't be able to stop me from leaving there, he said in a hoarse voice, sounding like the surrounding space was cracking. I will at least break your legs, the ice goddess replied in a cold tone. Whoosh! She flew off, appearing deep in the sky in just a flash. And just as she appeared there, an enormous long ice dragon suddenly appeared, surrounding her figure. The dragon was indeed not a dragon, completely ice, but even a real dragon might tremble in front of that dragon. It had ice scales shaped like spears and a pair of wings that each flap created an ice storm. Its divine aura radiated with great power, enough to make even a demigod tremble and have to kneel down. As Seal observed the back and forth between the dragon and the skull, he suddenly realized that the dragon was even bigger, as if it was an anaconda in front of a cow. Whoosh! The dragon lunged towards the skull, so fast that the skull was unable to react. Bang! The dragon's head slammed into the skull's chest, causing it to be knocked back quite a distance. The resulting shockwave was even so that Seal could see the ocean below being pushed back. It would probably cause tsunamis on many continents. It seems that the old man is still in the second stage of the god realm, Seal thought. The difference in power was significant. Plus, according to Seal's observation, the skull was probably the old man's strongest technique while the ice dragon was just an ordinary technique of the ice goddess. The former fought very seriously while the latter was quite relaxed. Chapter 52 Armageddon Ice. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Fuck you, bitch. The old man became enraged by the ice goddess attack. Even so, he didn't try to counter her attack because obviously his focus was on escaping from there. He began to fly into the sky, heading west. Unfortunately, it was definitely not easy as the ice goddess did not let him go. At this moment, countless ice spears appeared from the sky, each one larger than a mountain, possibly able to become the pillars of a continent. Simultaneously, they descended downwards like rain, but had the speed of lightning. The giant skull couldn't dodge the spears, some slammed into its body, producing countless bang sounds. However, the skull clearly had a very strong defense. The spears were apparently only able to scratch the skull, but not penetrate it. Goddess, our Grim Reaper has very strong defenses, it can compete with you, don't think about penetrating our defenses, shouted the old man inside the skull. Is the skull what he means? Asked Seal to the Elven Queen. He became even more curious about the old man. The Elf Queen nodded in response. The ancient night race has many unique abilities, one of the strongest is that Grim Reaper, not all can awaken it, and those who succeed have the certainty to become gods. That was quite surprising to Seal, not expecting that a race had such special abilities. Meanwhile, under the attack of those spears, that Grim Reaper continued to try to move away. The ice dragon's attack even seemed to work in its favor as it only made it faster. Is the ice goddess really unable to stop it? Seal knitted his brows as he looked at the scene. It's difficult even if I help her, the Elf Queen replied. Of course, we might still be able to kill him, but before that, he'll still have time to go on a rampage, slaughtering and doing massive amounts of damage. That's what needs to be avoided. However, the goddess will make him suffer. Sure enough, just as the Elf Queen finished speaking, something suddenly appeared in the hands of the ice goddess, a short spear that was golden in color but transparent so that it looked like it was created from golden diamonds. And it faintly emitted a cold golden mist, causing the air to become icy instantly. A weapon. Seal narrowed his eyes but quickly realized that it was not a weapon. It was clearly created from spiritual energy. It's the Armageddon ice. The Elf Queen suddenly replied. What kind of ice is it? Seal was surprised to hear the name because it sounded so horrible. Something created from the frozen heart, the Elf Queen replied. It hasn't reached its peak yet, so the Ice Goddess can only use it in a limited way, but once it does, the Ice Goddess will probably reach an unimaginable stage. Yeah, and your threat might be useless because even if you spread the Mirror Jade throughout the realm of life, the Ice Goddess might still be able to destroy them simultaneously in no time. When he heard that, Seal trembled for a moment. The Elf Queen's tone also seemed like she was scaring him. However, Seal calmed down very quickly as he thought that it was not that easy. If the Ice Goddess succeeded, obviously she would reach the unknown realm. Her power could shake the entire 7 realms. At that time, there was no chance at all to threaten her. And to achieve that, perhaps the Ice Goddess herself did not know when she could achieve it. Or it could be that Seal reached it first. Who knows? Fear flashed in the old man's eyes when he saw the golden spear. He increased his speed to the maximum, even adding various energy shields around him. Whoosh! The Ice Goddess didn't linger either, she threw the spear at him. Her movements looked elegant but swift, and the spear traveled faster than light. It struck the skull's head in just an instant. Bang! The skull was shaken as if the sky was falling on top of its head, and its head, which was clearly the hardest part of it, was easily pierced by the transparent golden spear. Crack! 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 Apparently, it does have so many layers that there is a process to penetrate it. Unfortunately, none of those layers could delay the movement of the spear. Bitch, you will definitely die in the near future. At this point, the old man only cursed the goddess of ice as the golden spear had already arrived right behind him. He hurriedly tried to aim it at a non-vital part of his body. Shwa! And finally, it penetrated his thigh. Surprisingly enough, his leg was also instantly cut off to spurt blood that was actually black in color. This was the first time Seal had seen black blood, but as far as he knew, it was always considered an evil thing. The truth was that no blood had a black color from the start unless it was crossed by evil things. Ah! The old man screamed. Spiritual energy exploded from his body while his speed increased again, looking like he was draining his energy excessively. The Ice Goddess did not pursue him and did not try to attack him again. She stood on the head of her ice dragon, observing the old man's departure. Due to his speed, it didn't take long before he disappeared. However, just moments later, there was the sound of an explosion in the distance. There seemed to be another god attacking the old man. While it might not be enough to kill him, he would definitely suffer more injuries. Of course, this made Seal even more confused because it seemed that the one antagonizing the old man wasn't just the Ice Goddess. Let's go. The Elf Queen then pulled Seal's body with her strength. They arrived at the ice continent in no time. The situation was somewhat tense due to the previous fight, especially those who were stronger. What exactly is that race? Why did the Ice Goddess and the other gods antagonize the old man? Seal asked the Elf Queen when they arrived in the city. Asked by Seal, the Elf Queen's eyes narrowed. They are not a part of the 7 realms, so they are antagonized by everyone in the 7 realms, she replied. And it's more because they're an evil race that thinks of us as food. Chapter 53 To the Palace Again. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Food. There is such a thing, why have I never heard of it? Seal was dumbfounded to hear that. And he couldn't help but feel terrible. How can everyone in the 7 realms be regarded as food? You naturally never heard of it, and you'd better not know more or you'll live in fear every day, the Elf Queen replied. However, Seal responded to her words with a light laugh. I'm not afraid of anything with 2 very strong women by my side, he said, causing the Elf Queen to roll her eyes. Only, it was as if she wanted to laugh. Unlike the Ice Goddess who was constantly angry, she could be gentle with Seal. Of course, this might just be because of her personality. After all, she was considered to be the most kind-hearted. At the same time, the ice goddess finally turned towards the ice continent. However, surprisingly enough, she did not make the ice dragon disappear. She returned with it. When the ice dragon got closer, Ciel finally realized that it was so big, perhaps bigger than the ice continent itself. Its movements created a loud rumble in the air, making even the spiritual energy in the entire ice continent become chaotic. No wonder people sometimes said that the gods' battles were worse than disasters. They were truly too powerful. The head of the ice dragon finally arrived above the city, and naturally, it was much bigger than the city. Everyone in the city fell down in a sweat at the sight of it. They imagined that if it hit the city, then all of them would surely die instantly. "Goddess, why did you bring that here?" asked Ciel, because he felt like the ice goddess wanted to show a domineering attitude after showing her power. The goddess did not answer. She looked at the elf queen. "I'm going to the heaven realm for 3 days, she told her. Ciel was somewhat surprised to hear that because the heaven realm was said to be the strongest realm among the 7 realms. The elf queen nodded in response, without asking anything. After that, the ice goddess finally looked at Ciel. "Boy, don't go anywhere before I return and don't make a mess," she said. Before she had gone unheeded, and now that she seemed to be giving him orders, Ciel became somewhat annoyed. Unfortunately, before he could say anything, the woman had already first controlled her ice dragon to turn around. Whoosh! It flew as fast as lightning, appearing in the distance so that it looked very small. Humph! Ciel could only snort in the end. What exactly does she want to do? He then asked the elf queen. Probably looking for something so that the next time she encounters an enemy like this, she can kill him, replied the elf queen. Ciel's thoughts stopped for a moment when he heard the elf queen's words before laughing. He suddenly realized how the ice goddess' reputation was, that she would chase after everyone who bothered her. In the previous case, she had to hold back because it could cause too great an effect, but obviously it was enough to frustrate her. If she didn't prepare from now on, the same case might happen again. And she would not allow that. Right. Ciel stared at a certain direction in the city, which was the location where he obtained the eyes of heaven. It seemed to appear suddenly, just as he passed by. The question was, how did it appear? Ciel could not speculate before because there was nothing unusual there, but now he wanted to use the power of his eyes to find out what happened before he passed that way. He then stepped there, leaving the elf queen with narrowed eyes. However, she saw nothing strange, so she chose to leave. Ciel quickly arrived at that street, surprising everyone there as the prince suddenly came alone. Simultaneously, they saluted. Ciel didn't care, he was focused on staring at the area where he had gotten the eyes of heaven. After that, he turned back time there to the day he passed there. In an instant, the scene where he obtained the eyes of heaven appeared in front of him. Then, he rewound time again, to the time before he arrived. Surprisingly enough, at that time, the eyes of heaven did not exist at all. "Strange," Ciel said in a low voice. However, just a moment later, the faint light he had seen at that time suddenly appeared. It was almost right when he was about to step on the area where the faint light appeared. "So it appeared at the time when I arrived, but how is it possible, how did it appear there?" Ciel became very confused. He continued to investigate, but there were no results at all. He didn't even find anything suspicious. Did it come by itself or did someone put it here? The last theory made Ciel tremble because it was indeed rather scary. However, he thought, how could there be someone who would throw away such a great thing? Ciel wouldn't do that even if he was crazy and had become a god. The first theory is also not completely unreasonable because the eyes of heaven is a heavenly treasure, something full of unpredictable abilities. If it suddenly changed places and appeared somewhere, it was still possible. Or perhaps a certain phenomenon moved it, who knows? Phew. He sighed and shook his head before going to the palace, not wanting to linger there as it made him uncomfortable. Plus, he wanted to start cultivating now as he wanted to become more and more powerful. Although the eyes of heaven gave him a stunning advantage, there was still a clear difference between having power and not. What he wanted was to have immense power like the ice goddess so that he could shake the world with just the power hidden within his body. It didn't take long before he arrived at the palace hall. Mu Yixue was still there, visibly having various emotions. Chapter 54. A guest. You are listening at novelfull.audio. You're finally back, she said when she saw Seal. She didn't add the word prince to her words, who knew how she would look at Seal now. Perhaps at first she viewed Seal as a little man that she could freeze at any time, but she had no other choice but to submit to him. When Seal managed to gain the status of an ice prince, she also showed respect to him by continuing to address him using the word prince. However, when they made love, she started calling him by his name directly. Right now, Seal suddenly felt like she didn't want any status barrier between them. I've only been gone a short while, do you miss me already? Asked Seal, slightly joking. Mu Yixue's lips pressed together for a moment in reaction. I just don't want anything bad to happen to you and cause chaos afterwards, Mu Yixue replied. Of course, Seal's death would be especially frightening because her secret could be exposed. Seal patted her waist as he arrived beside her before continuing to walk to the throne. It was actually better to cultivate in the room, but Seal was somewhat uncomfortable with the presence of those little black creatures. He needed to know what they were first before returning to the room. If they were just the ice goddess pets, then everything would be fine, perhaps it would be fine to bathe in the pool as well. After sitting down, he took out the nature spiritual pill that the elf queen had given him. I want to cultivate, if you want to come out, you can come out, Seal said to Mu Yixue. However, the woman shook her head. I'm just here, there might be trouble for you while cultivating, so I need to help. Just tell me that you can't go far from me, this is natural for a woman who has just had the experience of making love with a man, Seal replied, which instantly froze Mu Yixue's face. Realizing that she couldn't possibly win an argument with him, Mu Yixue finally chose to shut her mouth. Unfortunately, there was truth in Seal's words. She could not deny that it was her pleasure at seeing him that made her want to cuddle with him. Seal then placed the pill in his mouth. The sweet and cold taste surprised him a little because all the cultivation-enhancing pills he had taken so far were always very bitter, so his expression was always gloomy when he wanted to cultivate. This time, he did not hesitate to swallow it. His eyes emitted light instantly as the pill melted inside his stomach and released boundless spiritual energy. What was truly shocking was the purity of that energy. It was so light that it seemed like he had just swallowed the wind, and it actually merged with his body very easily. It even seemed like it was making improvements to his body structure, which then increased his physical strength, and of course his cultivation talent became much better. It seems that this can help me become a spiritual king, Seal thought, becoming even more excited. He then closed his eyes, allowing the spiritual energy to fuse into his body. After closing his eyes, he felt as if he was flowing with the world, going to another, more mysterious world with more magic. Even the concept of time seemed to disappear from his mind such that he was unaware of how much time had passed. The only thing clear to him was his ever-increasing strength. Bang! He opened his eyes just as an explosion resounded inside his body. In an instant, the pressure he emitted increased drastically while Holy Spirit flames surged from his body, filling the palace hall in an instant. Even Mu Yixue had to create a wall of ice around her to contain the flames. And she was a little surprised. From a spiritual king, but already this powerful, the holy flame is indeed as powerful as people say, she thought. It wasn't enough to trouble her because the difference in her cultivation and Seal's cultivation was so vast. However, she could not argue that if she was also a spiritual king, she would have a hard time facing Seal, even though her strength could be said to be a weak point for the power of fire. To Seal, the new information that entered his head was far more interesting than just his breakthroughs. He obtained another ability from the eyes of heaven, and this could be said to be a very far-fetched ability. And from the description of the information, this seemed to be an offshoot ability of the previous ability. First, the previous ability, the ability to see into the past, took on increased power. It now allows him to see 1 month back, much longer than the previous one where he could only see 3 days back. As for the new ability, it was actually the ability to return time to the past within a certain area. It is no longer the ability to see the past, but to actually make the world go back in time. Even if there was a limit to the area, and those outside the area were unaffected, still in battle, this would render every enemy helpless. And with his current strength, he can at least turn back time by a minute. It seems that these eyes are related quite a lot to the power of time, thought Seal Few. He only needed a sigh to draw out all the flames in the hall. Unfortunately, the flames could not even create a scratch on the walls of the hall, not to mention on the ice sculptures. This was inevitable because the difference in power was too great. Mu Ishua walked over to Seal, looking him up and down. You already have quality cultivation, she told him. She hadn't expected that this man could change so quickly. It's far from enough, Seal replied, smiling slightly as he looked at his hands. Right after that, Mu Ishua spoke again. There's someone coming. Someone's coming. Who? Seal was a little confused by her words. The Elf Queen's nephew, he seems to be delivering your artifact, but he still hasn't left, maybe he wants to meet you, Mu Ishua replied. Chapter 55 Abel. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Oh. Seal showed an interested expression. Not going because he wanted to meet him, Seal thought that the man might want to challenge him. How strong is he? Asked Seal to Mu Ishua. Still at the Spiritual King second stage. What? Seal almost jumped at that. A Spiritual King. Of course, he was proud to have reached the realm of spiritual kings at his age. If he returned to the Fire Mountain continent, he would be one of the best geniuses there, but an Elf Queen's nephew had a different status. He's only 10 years old, Mu Ishua added as she looked at Seal's expression. Hearing that, Seal's mouth opened, not knowing whether to laugh or cry. 10 years old and a spiritual king. Thinking of that made him regret a lot of his past life. If only he had gotten the eyes of heaven earlier. Alright, I'll go see him. Seal finally stood up, walking straight towards the palace door. It turned out that it was indeed very crowded outside. People were surrounding the young elf who, although male, had a beautiful appearance. He was really beautiful, unlike Seal who was a combination of beautiful and handsome. That is the characteristic of the elf race, even their men will look more beautiful. What made people admire the young elf was his ability to improve the cultivation quality of even hegemons and heal their wounds. And he really helped everyone who came asking for help. Of course, he still stopped when he saw 2 figures coming out of the palace. He immediately ignored Mu Ishua's existence, he only stared at Seal who seemed to be a celestial prince who descended to the mortal world. For a moment, he thought that this young man was indeed something unique. However, in a short period of time, he showed a dismissive expression as he looked at his cultivation which was still 1 level below his. Given their age difference, this was indeed amusing and ridiculous. In his place, all youths of Seal's age were already hegemons no matter how useless they were. Seal who had started to get used to his status was naturally uncomfortable with the young elf's gaze. Boy, what is that face? Don't you know that the Elf Queen has issued an edict declaring that I am the young king of the Elf Kingdom, Seal told him. He deliberately said that so that everyone would know. Of course, the people who heard that were immediately stunned. Young king. How is that possible? He's not an elf. One of them said. Wait, then what is his identity? If he's the son of the ice goddess, it's only natural for him to be a prince, but young king of the Elf Kingdom. I've never even heard of someone receiving that title. Is it a title equivalent to that of the Elf Queen? Strange, don't tell me that the Ice Prince's identity is more amazing than we thought. The conversation of the people made the young elf's ears turn red, as if they were overheated. "Weak creature, watch your words," he said in a loud voice to Seal. There was obvious anger, but due to the natural innateness of his young body, his voice sounded very soft. Seal's face froze for a moment at his words, then he burst out laughing. "Yeah, I know that elves are brave, but boy, you should know where your limits are," Seal said with cold eyes. After saying that, she took out the Elf Queen's edict, releasing its aura completely. It instantly radiated all the way past the city boundaries, people trembling because of it. The mouth of the young elf who was actually named Abel opened wide. He spontaneously said, "Really, Aunt's aura, how could she do this?" Although the Elf Queen had already announced it, he didn't really believe it. Unfortunately, he saw it firsthand now. This was unacceptable. The elves were a unique and honorable race. They were the highest nobility among all the races in the 7 realms, considered on par with the dragon and phoenix races, and even the heaven race in the heaven realm. A race like them would not accept humans acting superior to them, even to the strongest humans, not to mention weak ones like Seal. It was just that, the aura of the edict made him tremble and helpless. In the end, he could only say, "If you are indeed a man, fight me." His voice trembled and was too loud as he said that, the effect of the aura. However, Seal was immediately interested in hearing his words. He even retracted the aura of decree. "Fighting, huh?" he said in a low voice. The reason he was interested was because he wanted to try his strength, and this young elf was a suitable opponent for him. Although overall, the main abilities of elves are not direct combat, but they are still stronger than most people. "Do you dare?" the young elf asked when Seal showed an interested expression. Of course I dare, how could I be afraid of my own subordinates?" Seal laughed softly, making Abel's face turn blue for a moment. "Good, but I don't want to be too hard on you, so I'll lower my cultivation by 1 stage to be on par with you," Abel replied. Whoosh! He immediately lunged toward Seal after he said that. A green aura emanated from his body, making the air extremely fresh. His hand was aimed at Seal and suddenly countless roots came out of that hand, each one forming the head of a beast. They could even roar, vibrating the air. From Seal's perspective, it was as if there was a forest in front of him. However, Seal casually raised his palm. Shwa! Transparent flames blazed, instantly filling the air with fire, a sight that shocked the eyes as the heat of the flames made their eyes sting even though they were quite far away. "This is the Holy Spirit flame." The powerful hegemons quickly recognized the flames, and only further shocked the people. "Does he just have it?" a young genius wondered. At this moment, the fire condensed, and became small, gathering above Seal's palm, forming something like a ball, and it spun very quickly, destabilizing the air around. Chapter 56 Fight. You are listening at NovelFull.audio. Each fire has its own way of attacking. Some are more suitable for attacking by becoming a sea of fire, some become various weapons, and there are also fires that are more suitable for exploding. The Holy Spirit flame also had its own way, and Seal as its owner always had some sort of instinct to shape his Holy Spirit flame into a ball of fire that was the result of fire being condensed. It could be blown up or to burn a certain small spot. Whoosh! Seal advanced forward, toward the roots. One root with a lion's head advanced faster, it lunged toward Seal as if it wanted to eat him. Seal calmly responded by aiming the fireball in his hand at the lion's head. Shwa! Instantly, the lion's head burst into flames, turning to ash very quickly. It turned out to be too weak compared to the Holy Spirit flame. Seal began to attack the other roots, which were also helpless before his fireball. Abel, the young elf's forehead wrinkled as he saw that, looking like he didn't expect that this enemy he underestimated had such astonishing power. However, that didn't worry him at all. "Eat this," he said suddenly. From under the ground, countless trees suddenly appeared, becoming a forest in an instant. However, this was no ordinary forest, each tree was apparently emitting a green blur that smelled extremely fragrant, but when people smelled the aroma, they quickly covered their noses. A very dangerous poison, said some old hegemon. This was the power of the elves, they were extraordinary with their life energy, but that didn't mean life energy only produced positive things. When life energy undergoes a slight change, it can become something very deadly. Seal found he was starting to struggle a bit even though he had first surrounded his body with fire. If it was just ordinary fire, even with the quality of his cultivation now, he would probably still lose outright. Fortunately he had the Holy Spirit flame. Whoosh! He finally threw the fireball in his hand. It was still able to ignore the poison due to its density, and it quickly shot towards Abel. The latter was apparently unable to move as he needed to keep pouring his energy into the ground he stepped on or else the forest would stop functioning. That left him with no choice but to simply deflect the fireball. Humph! He snorted softly and a root suddenly came out in front of him. It was different from the other roots as it was entirely golden in color, even faintly emitting light as if it were iron. This is the root of the world tree, said the old hegemon. Still young but can already summon the root of the world tree, his potential is clearly limitless, worthy of being the elf queen's nephew. Yeah, the power of the world tree is one that is hard to fight against, I don't know if the Holy Spirit flame can pass through it. I think it still can, after all, it is desired by many fire power users, but it is very difficult to obtain, its power is also unique and terrifying. Just one root of the world tree cannot yet be considered invincible. Bang! The fireball slammed into the golden root, shaking it instantly. However, it was indeed different from the other roots in that it didn't immediately turn to ashes, it hadn't even burned yet. The fireball continued to spin, trying to penetrate the root. Although it was slow, it still managed to penetrate the root. I think I'll still win, Seal thought as he looked at it, and was amazed at the power of the Holy Spirit flame. Click! He snapped his fingers and the ball instantly became smaller. After that, it suddenly exploded. Boom! The explosion was extremely powerful, turning into a mushroom-shaped flame in just an instant. Its size was so large, it engulfed the poisonous forest as well. There was even a sound as if a tree collapsed within the explosion, indicating that the root of the world tree also suffered destruction. Some people, even low-level hegemons, chose to move backwards to keep their distance as they still felt the threat from the explosion. Asshole, Seal suddenly heard the sound of Abel shouting. The elf seemed to be very angry. Seal waved his hand to dispel the explosion and soon found the boy with several burns on his body. He was also thrown from where he was standing, almost hitting a building. You lost. Seal said to him with a quiet laugh. Actually, it was rather inappropriate to say that since his enemy was only 10 years old. Right after Seal said that, the boy's aura suddenly increased by one stage. His eyes turned red as he stared at Seal and he shouted, I'm going to beat you up today. Whoosh! He lunged at Seal once again. A kid is still a kid, he was too hot-blooded to control his emotions. Seal knew that he would not win now, he was even prepared to use the power of the eyes of heaven. However, a snowman wearing silver armor suddenly came, creating a wall of ice in front of Abel so that he accidentally bumped into him. Bang! He bounced back, coughing. You! Abel became even angrier at being interrupted. Unfair fight, not allowed, the snowman replied. He was Shwehu. He then approached Seal, taking something out of his storage ring. It is exactly like a mirror, quite small. The height is about 15 centimeters while the width is about 10 centimeters. Prince, this is your artifact, Shwehu said to Seal as he handed the object to him. Apparently, upon arriving here, Abel had already handed the artifact to Shwehu first. Seal took it without hesitation while saying, thank you. After that, he immediately turned back to the palace with his eyes staring at the mirror in his hand. He used the power of the eyes of heaven to observe the object to find out if there was some kind of mechanism that might be able to keep an eye on him. Chapter 57 Surprising You are listening at novelfull.audio. This seems to be fine, Seal thought after a while. Of course, it's a very powerful artifact, so the structure is also very complicated. The eyes of heaven can see everything, even the most hidden things. From all those structures, Seal found a common source, no different sources. He had the conclusion that there was nothing wrong because if there was a certain feature, it must have a slight difference in the structure. By the way, where is the elf queen? Asked Seal to Muishue. He hadn't seen the woman since he finished cultivating. Even she hadn't shown up since her nephew came to make a mess. Unfortunately, Muishue didn't seem to know either. She shrugged her shoulders in response. Seal rolled his eyes and finally sat down on the throne. Phew. He sighed, trying to stabilize the energy in his body. The fight was quite short, he didn't use much energy, but he had to admit that he hadn't fully gotten used to this new power that was too much different compared to his previous power. Using it caused him to feel his body a little uncomfortable. I think I need some wine too, he said, glancing at Muishue. The latter rolled her eyes, taking out a cup and bottle filled with wine. Only, right after that, she suddenly looked like she wanted to hand them directly to Seal. Before she could really move, Seal said, a good wife helps her husband pour the drink into the cup. You. Muishue opened her mouth at his words. Her intention of wanting to establish an equal relationship with him suddenly seemed to be shattered as Seal's words sounded like an order to her. Of course, what he said actually made sense, but that was only for the little wife. Unfortunately, Muishue was still somewhat unwilling to challenge Seal, so she still did as Seal said, pouring the wine into that cup before handing it to Seal. This is the right one, Seal said. He started drinking the wine, quite slowly. However, he did not stop at just drinking the wine. From his storage ring, he took out a long brown cigar. It was actually the last one he had. He would have to buy another one later. Using his fire power, he burned the end of the cigar until it became embers. After that, he placed the other end into his mouth and began to gently suck on it. Whoa! He exhaled the smoke forward, forming a halo that became larger and larger as it got further away from his mouth. Muishue blinked her eyes a few times, looking astonished. Actually, very few smoked in the ice continent, which was due to the absence of tobacco plants here. Those who wanted to smoke had to import it from other continents, and unfortunately there weren't many who did that except for those who lived outside the ice continent for a long time. By the way, Ishue, in your clan, is there anyone stronger than your aunt? Asked Seal after she had relaxed enough. He was quite curious about their clan as they seemed to have high-quality women. Plus, 2 women in the clan had already bonded with him. The younger one had already made love to him while the older one he had kissed. Muishue was somewhat surprised that Seal asked that. She replied, no, my father is only at the first stage demigod, and there are 2 elders, one of whom is at the second stage. So your aunt is really the strongest? Yes. What about your mom? What? Muishue's body almost fell over because of Seal's question. Her eyes flickered from shaking too strongly. Hey, what's that reaction? Seal asked with a soft laugh. He understood why Muishue reacted like that, which was obviously caused by his mischievous nature. Muishue was not a woman who could not speculate. This man was even eyeing the ice goddess and the elf queen. It wasn't strange that he was fantasizing about her mother as well. However, Seal actually didn't think that far ahead. The question was purely out of curiosity. Plus, it wasn't necessarily that Seal was interested in Muishue's mother. According to rumors, women who had husbands and children on the ice continent were generally not as powerful as the women in the ice palace. It's really rare for there to be more powerful ones. Muishue began to try to calm herself down even though it seemed difficult. After taking a deep breath, she said, my mother is only at the 9th hegemon stage, she doesn't have great combat power either. Oh. That did seem to be what the rumors were. However, she must be very beautiful considering she could give birth to such a beautiful daughter, am I right? Seal said. He deliberately said that because it was Mu Yixue who was acting as if she misunderstood. Since it was like that, just let her continue to misunderstand. This time, Mu Yixue wasn't shaken anymore like before because she directly answered his words. Seal, you should stop thinking about that or trying to do something strange. Otherwise, I'll get angry. Her voice became louder with time, as if she was ready to go on a rampage. Seal finally laughed at her reaction. However, he did not give her an answer. His gaze then moved to the mirror in his hand. He sent his spiritual energy into the mirror to activate it. Using it was very easy. Once it is activated, simply send information about what you want to know into the mirror. For example, regarding certain creatures, you should also send their images into the information you send. This is not something difficult even for low-level cultivators as it is not difficult for them to show their memories to others. Seal was currently curious about the creatures in the Ice Goddess bathroom, so he sent information about them based on what he saw. The mirror then emitted light and shook lightly, digesting the information Seal had given it and looking for a match in the information stored inside. And apparently, the information about the creatures was really inside the mirror because it stopped shaking not long after. After that, light emanated from the mirror again, gathering to form a denser beam of light. Whoosh! It then entered Seal's head and Seal instantly received the information. Death Worm. Strange creatures created by the ancient Night King, the mysterious being behind the race. It is said that they are the most feared by all the gods in the 7 realms as they are truly menacing. They have the ability to consume gods in a short period of time. At the same time, they are undetectable and cannot be seen unless the gods raise their vision to the maximum with all their strength. And in fact, there were already 2 supreme gods, equivalent to the Ice Goddess and the Elven Queen who were killed by them. So far, there was no way to overcome them. The good thing was that their numbers were also limited so the ancient night race could not use them at will. Plus, attacking using the worms directly was also not easy as the gods could protect themselves first. Hence, the ancient night race usually only used them covertly, when the gods were caught off guard. Damn it! How can such dangerous creatures be in the Ice Goddess bathroom? Seal was so stunned that he jumped off the throne. Chapter 58 More surprising. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Seal, what happened? Asked Mu Yixue, unable to help but be confused by Seal's reaction. And she couldn't understand the meaning of his words. Seal didn't respond to her words as he instantly sank into his thoughts. Did the Ice Goddess keep them there? No, it's impossible. How could she keep dangerous creatures without any security at all? She must be crazy. Then does that mean it was done by someone else? Who? Seal narrowed his eyes as he thought of the only person who could enter the Ice Goddess room other than the goddess herself. Thinking of that made him take a deep breath. Wait here, he said to Mu Yixue. He then strode off, heading for the goddess's room. Although the creatures were dangerous, but according to the information, they would not do anything as long as they did not get a command signal from the people who had the authority to command them. Quickly, Seal arrived back at the bathroom. He activated his eyes of heaven before even arriving there, so when he arrived, he could immediately see the creatures. Let's see when you all come, he said, starting to rewind time there. He even directly rewound time to the exact moment the Ice Goddess and the Elf Queen made love because he thought he would find better clues at that time. Surprisingly enough, at that time, the pool was still clear of the creatures. Did they come when I wasn't watching? Seal started to advance time again, and slightly accelerated the movement of time. It didn't take long for him to finally see the arrival of the creatures. They came through the door, right at the stroke of midnight. Oh! Seal wanted to laugh, something he didn't know why either. He then gazed into the ice goddess' bedroom while rewinding time to a few minutes earlier. Quickly, he saw again two beautiful naked figures embracing each other. They were sleeping soundly, suppressing their strength intentionally so that their sleep could not be disturbed either. However, just a few moments after Seal watched, the Elf Queen's index finger that was on the ice goddess' back suddenly moved. It twitched, up and down, as if it wanted to do something. Occasionally, it touched the ice goddess's back, but there seemed to be something that made the Elf Queen hesitate. The hand was pointed in another direction. The movement was repeated several times until finally the index finger was pointing towards the bathroom door. Immediately afterwards, small black creatures surged out from that index finger, going into the bathroom through the gap under the door. Everything happened in a moment while the little creatures were now lodged in the swimming pool in the bathroom. Now everything was really clear. A big conspiracy is going on here. Ha 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 ha. Seal laughed loudly with his head pointed at the sky. Even Mui Shue, who was in the hall, could hear his laughter. On the other hand, Seal left the room, returned to the hall and immediately received an astonished look from Mui Shue. "What's wrong with you?" she asked, because even now, Seal was still laughing to himself. Mui Shue couldn't help but worry that there was a problem with this man's brain. Perhaps his originally bad talent was unable to accept good things, causing him to go crazy. This was not something that never happened. However, Seal responded by grabbing the woman's hand, pulling her into his arms. Without saying anything, he kissed her lips wildly while groping her breasts. Mui Shue was unprepared for his actions, but of course, she was still in a state filled with memories of lovemaking, so her desire increased rapidly due to Seal's wild touch. Her face turned red while her breathing became warm. She stared at Seal's slightly reddish eyes, as if he was possessed by a demon. Or perhaps the effect of the wine he had just drunk had increased suddenly. Since Mui Shue already had no desire to resist something like this, so she responded to Seal's movements, grabbing the front of his shirt to hold on to. She then returned Seal's kiss rather gently, occasionally pressing her lips against his. However, surprisingly enough, Seal broke off the kiss. After that, he even took a deep breath as if he wanted to calm himself down. "I have more work tonight," Seal said, surprising Mui Shue as she immediately thought Seal wanted her to deploy the jade mirror once more. "What exactly did you find?" asked Mui Shue in a low voice. By now, she could instantly deduce that Seal had found something very surprising. "It's better you don't know or you'll live a life of fear," Seal replied with a quiet laugh. At the same time, he was thinking, where is the Elf Queen now? Is she still on the ice continent or not? Perhaps either the Elf Queen or the Ice Goddess already knew that it was Mui Shue who scattered those jades. If either of them saw Mui Shue making strange movements again, they would definitely be suspicious. Right now, the Ice Goddess was off to another realm, so she could be ignored, but what about the Elf Queen? Seal needed to make sure that she wasn't looking. After that, he stood up, stepping outside the palace. Abel was still there, looking annoyed while staring at the palace. He was surprised to see Seal come out again and immediately shouted to him. "Let's fight again, I will still lower my strength." "Heh, can't you accept defeat?" Seal mocked him in response, which obviously made him even angrier. "Where's your aunt?" Seal then asked. He thought this little elf should know the whereabouts of the Elf Queen. "She went to space," Abel replied coldly. "Space?" Seal couldn't help but be surprised to hear that and spontaneously looked up. It was so far away that there was no way he could see there even with the power of the eyes of heaven because his own power was so weak right now. What is she doing there? Seal wondered, getting more and more confused. However, it should be fine to deploy the mirror jade now. He finally returned inside the palace, ignoring Abel who wanted to fight with him. Now, he needed to produce his mirror jade first. Chapter 59 May Family Restaurant. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Since his strength had increased a lot, Seal could produce more mirror jade in less time. He wanted to move quickly, so after everything was done, he immediately ordered Mu Yixue to spread those mirror jade throughout the realm of life while he himself remained in the palace, thinking about his next plan. This was something so complicated that he himself wasn't quite sure what to do with it. Tell the ice goddess. He was worried that this would cause a conflict that could not be controlled. It could become an endless war between the Ice Palace and the Elf Kingdom. For him who was still weak, this was naturally very bad. The path of cultivation could have become difficult. Plus, these two were what he relied on to develop, he naturally didn't want to see them become messy. The second option was to use that to make the Elf Queen even more powerless in front of him. The Queen must be afraid of being exposed. From her movements, Seal thought she also had reservations about doing that. Who knows the reason she did that? Maybe she was forced or there was something that made her want the death of the ice goddess. However, the problem was, what if the Elf Queen really wanted to kill the ice goddess? Seal was worried that in that scenario she would kill him first before killing the ice goddess. Actually, a more thorough plan was needed before he tried to do anything. However, Seal knew that time was limited for this as the worms were already ready to kill the goddess. I guess I need to wait for the ice goddess to return first, he thought. If there was the goddess around, even if he and the Elf Queen were at the eastern end of the ice continent while the ice goddess was at its western end, the situation was still safer. In the scenario that the Elf Queen wanted to kill him, she would still have to destroy the protection formation on his body first, which would definitely take time. At that time, the ice goddess could arrive in time. Although the ice goddess was the one who wanted to kill him the most, she would definitely question why the Elf Queen wanted to kill him, while until now it had always been the Elf Queen who prevented her from doing so. Phew. In the end, Seal sighed and walked out of the palace again. He was the type who didn't like to be made dizzy, and he thought it was necessary to drink and get drunk first to get rid of the various thoughts in his head. The sky was already completely dark by the time he arrived outside the palace. Even Abel had disappeared, leaving only the passers-by and the snowmen standing guard. Xuehu came over to Seal. He asked, "Prince, do you want your horse?" Seal thought for a while but finally shook his head. "No need, I'll just walk, but I want you to follow me," he replied. "Roger." Xuehu answered immediately, knowing that Seal needed bodyguards. He called the other 3 snowmen to follow. Under Seal's lead, they went to the city. "Where do you want to go, Prince?" asked Xuehu. "Do you know the most luxurious restaurant in the city?" Seal answered with a question. "The most luxurious restaurant?" Xuehu looked around before nodding. "There is no doubt that it is the Mei family restaurant. They have the most delicious food. Even if the goddess wants to eat, they usually provide it." Oh. Seal suddenly remembered Mei, the young girl who had a crush on him. Because today he wasn't going anywhere, so they couldn't meet. "Alright, let's go to that restaurant," he said. Hearing that, Xuehu pointed to a street full of luxuries. The average people on this street were the great nobles of the ice continent. However, even they had no other choice but to salute the moment they saw Seal, who was followed by Xuehu. Even Xuehu gained great respect, proving his strength was also feared. Not long after, Seal and the snowmen arrived in front of a magnificent building that was more akin to a palace. The entire building seemed to be created from crystal, slightly transparent and faintly glowing with a majestic light that those without power or wealth would feel unworthy of entering. When arriving in front of its door, Seal suddenly saw Mei, still in the same style. She was wearing a white shirt and a short blue skirt while her hair was in 2 pigtails, making her look younger, sweeter, and more vibrant. Here, she seemed to be helping the waiters serve the guests. Despite her status, it doesn't really look like it's out of place because the guests are also big people. She quickly noticed Seal's arrival, something that made her open her charming lips. "Prince," she said spontaneously, but with a slightly trembling voice. Seal smiled at her as he said, "I heard this restaurant is the best restaurant, so I want to eat here. I'm welcome, right?" "Sure, of course you're very welcome here. please come in. Mei Mei replied hurriedly. Her breathing seemed to quicken while her face turned red, as if she was thinking about something. Seal, on the other hand, stepped into the restaurant, looking around for a table, ignoring the various reactions of the other diners. Finally, he was drawn to the table beside the window, so he walked over to it. Mei Mei hurriedly followed. "Prince, there's a private room upstairs, how about going there?" she said. However, Seal shook his head. "No need, I'll stay here," he replied. He sat down immediately after saying that and added, "Give me the best dish." Mei Mei pressed her lips together at Seal's decision. She finally nodded and ordered the waiters to prepare the best dishes for Seal. It's just that, right after that there was suddenly a young man who came, the same age as Seal. He had long hair, looked handsome and attractive although still far compared to Seal. His aura was also deep, seemingly at the hegemon fourth stage. And he had a sword hanging from his waist. A cold aura constantly emanated from the sword. Chapter 60 Eat and Drink. You are listening at novelfull.audio. As Seal looked at him, he suddenly received information from Xuehu through voice transmission. "Prince, this man is Mei Mei's cousin, the genius of the Mei clan, his name is Mei Ao. He was good friends with Luca who was killed by the goddess. Maybe he doesn't like you." Seal was somewhat surprised to hear what Xuehu said. He was actually confused as to how the snowman knew the details of someone who was probably rarely in this city. "I thought you only spent time in the palace without caring about the outside world." Seal replied. "I do not care, but we snowmen are always keeping an eye on the entire ice continent and all information will be sent to me, in preparation if the goddess wants to ask." Xuehu explained. When Mei Ao arrived beside Mei Mei, he suddenly said, "Sis, let's go." "What?" Mei Mei was stunned by his words. She was in a mood situation full of excitement at finally being able to be with Seal. Why was she suddenly being asked to leave? Mei Mei quickly shook her head. "No, I'm staying, you can go by yourself," she replied. Actually, she also didn't know where Mei Ao wanted to take her. Hearing Mei Mei's answer, Mei Ao frowned. "Sis, there are friends from other continents coming, we should welcome them," Mei Ao said. This was something even Mei Mei had just heard. Of course, even if there were Mei clan friends coming, she didn't have to come welcome them since she was an Ice Palace disciple. That was her true status, while the Mei clan was just the place where she came from or her family, but had no ties in cultivation. This was because her cultivation was built in the Ice Palace and used its resources. "If she doesn't want to, there's no need to force her," Seal chimed in, reprimanding the man. Knowing that he likely wanted to keep Mei Mei away from him, so there was no need for politeness. And he was happy to come into conflict with people like this. Even Luca ended up dead, not to mention him, who was weaker. Hearing Seal speak, Mei Ao suddenly pressed his lips together, unsure of how to respond. All his actions were actually based on emotions due to his dislike for Seal. However, even with emotions, he found that he did not dare to refute Seal's words. Luca died tragically and none of his family dared to take revenge. If he challenged Seal, Mei Ao thought that the elders guarding this restaurant would kill him first despite his very high status in the clan as the son of the clan patriarch. When she saw him fall silent, Mei Mei almost laughed, thinking that this man had finally met the man he could not suppress. On the outside, Mei Mei knew that he often suppressed weaker people. Fortunately at this moment, the waiters came carrying various trays. The delicious aroma of various condiments spread throughout the restaurant, even to the streets, much to the surprise of the people. They suddenly realized that this restaurant had more delicious dishes. One by one, the waiters placed the trays on Seal's table. The last one looked at each tray. He found various types of dishes, from meat that seemed to be roasted with a special fire, rare vegetables that could strengthen the body, to various types of wine. In fact, even the ice cubes provided were quite unique, probably taken from a very hard to reach place. Actually, even Maao was surprised by the dishes as he knew each one was only reserved for special people. Mei also has no authority to provide such dishes, which means the elder who look after this restaurant decide on things. This made Maao even more afraid of challenging Seal. On the other hand, Mei was happy that the clan was trying its best to serve Seal. This would at least improve Seal's impression of her. "Please eat, Prince," she said in a soft tone that almost sounded like a flirtatious tone. "Sure," Seal replied with a faint smile. The first thing he picked up was the cup filled with white wine, the aroma attracting him too much. He didn't know what kind of wine it was, he thought it was not inferior to yesterday's monkey wine. Without hesitation, he drank it straight away. It was cold because it was mixed with ice cubes, but it instantly felt warm as it passed through his throat. He felt as if bad parts of his brain were burned away, leaving his feeling nothing more than an inexplicable happy sensation. He thought that if the Elf Queen was here right now, he would directly show the video of her putting the death worms into the ice goddess room and then threaten her without caring about the consequences. This was the main effect of the wine, making him think as if only good things were happening to him. "This is very delicious," he said to Mei. "Do vi ko, do you like it, Prince? If you wish, we can send it to you every day." Mei replied, so excited that she forgot that the wine was in short supply. "Every day is too much," Seal replied, knowing that it made no sense. Then, he patted his own thigh before continuing, "But I think it would be more fun if I could eat while a pretty girl like you sits here, helping me eat and accompanying me to drink." Because his brain function was already reduced, so Seal started saying nonsense, and wanted more than he should. Mu Ishue was unfortunately not here, so he could only replace her with Mei, who was still quite charming although not as beautiful as Mu Ishue. At least her being a few years younger had a special appeal. If one had to compare with terms on Earth, Seal would say that Mei was a girl who had just gotten out of the lowly zone. She wasn't a lowly anymore, but had a slight impression of a lowly. Mei's mouth opened while her face and neck became very red from Seal's words. It was as if she could not believe what she was hearing. Maao was also shocked and at the same time couldn't help but be angry that a man he didn't like wanted his cousin, especially when he already had one beautiful woman.